Welcome, Rhoda, to my Let's Talk. I'm
Thank you.
very happy to have you as my guest today. I would like to just briefly introduce you. You are the founder of A Multicultural Life and a certified life coach. And you help other expat moms reduce the overload, find ways to parent with their traveling spouse, thrive as a couple and as a family, even when apart. Have smoother reconnection when the traveling partner comes home from a business trip.
Right.
So, Rhoda, there's so much that you can tell us about this topic. Please tell us everything you would like to share about your journey, when it started, how it started, and where you are right now.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mpe, for having me. I'm so excited to be able to talk about this topic. The topic of, living abroad and having a spouse who travels a lot. We've been married for about 15 years. My husband is Swiss. He works in humanitarian work and development. But he's been traveling for practically much from the beginning of our marriage. I only really realized that when we started discussing last year about him going for 8 weeks or more. And I started asking questions from other families who had lived sort of in split locations like that with one of the parents who was going for longer periods of time. And that's when I started thinking, oh yes, these people gave me advice and they saved me so much hassle, and I was able to put things in place that helped. And I suddenly realized two things. There's more of us than we think. A lot of people abroad, families abroad, actually, there's a lot of business travel involved for one or both partners. And the other thing I realized was that he'd been traveling the whole time we'd been married, really. And so it was a continuation of that. It was just going to be a longer amount of weeks. So that's that. We're also a multicultural family, a multilingual family. I grew up in France. My mom is Syrian Armenian, and my dad is Welsh. But they both left home when they were very well in their early 20s, and they've traveled around. So, and then I grew up in France. So yeah, a little bit mixed. So yeah, so we speak French, English, Swiss, German at home. Yeah.
Yes. And you didn't learn your mother's language? Yes.
No, that's something that I regret personally. But when they moved to France, they weren't sure how many languages a child could take, and they didn't want to overload us. At the time, they didn't really know. And so they said, let's stick to French in school, English at home. And my mom had learned English in school. She'd gone to an American school, and so her English is pretty good. So, but it's a shame. I always regretted it. I still regret now I can't speak to her in her mother tongue and speak to my aunts and uncles and my extended family in Arabic. Yeah.
Well, we can still learn it maybe, but it's quite a journey. Yeah.
It is a journey, but I love it. I mean, yeah, it's one of those things. At the time, I think didn't know, but yeah.
Yes, but in the end, we live with the decisions that have been made or that we make at some point. And talking about decisions, this is
Yes.
a question that I have for you. As you said that your husband was traveling practically throughout your whole marriage.
Yes.
Were you aware what you were signing up for? How did you agree on this kind of journey?
Yeah, I think for us, I've only known married life abroad. We weren't, married somewhere or together somewhere, and then we decided to move abroad. So it's one of those things where, we when we met together, we were in different countries anyway. So I think I kind of knew what I was letting myself into. I don't think I expected as much travel.
Okay.
On his part. I think I thought we would move and then continue moving, but that we would be mostly together in the same location. I think he's had various options of travel. He's been, sometimes he was gone a couple of weeks, then say 2 weeks at a time, then back a few weeks, then off again. He's been gone Monday to Fridays. For a year, we did that. For a year or two, he also did like uneven. And I think that's what I found the hardest, sort of maybe 2 or 3 days one week, and then 4 days another week, and then, oh no, that's 2 days. And that was really, really, that was harder than now, which is more or less 8 weeks at a time. He's been on emergency travel lists where he would need to go overnight. I think a lot of people would resonate with this sort of, the uncertainty sometimes linked to travel from a spouse. You think they're leaving on a Sunday, but then actually, it changes. So sometimes now, until he gets on that plane to come back or on the plane to leave, I kind of take it with a pinch of salt.
Yes, that's actually something that I know that you shared in your Facebook group that's called Solo Parenting Expat Moms.
Yes.
When it comes to these uncertainties, when the partner is going to go away, what is helpful and what is more disruptive also for the routine that you try to build or that you try to maintain while the spouse is abroad or when he comes back?
Yeah, I think that before I answer your question, I think there is something about being abroad, right? One of my friends, she said to me a few years ago, they're Americans and they moved to Switzerland for his work. And she said, being in Switzerland, his travel feels very different to the travel that he would make in the US. And that got me thinking, and I sort of asked her a couple more questions. I was like, what's different? And because that's all I've known, living outside of my home country, whatever that is. And she said, well, when I was in America, I had a job, I had friends, a lot of friends around. I hadn't moved, so I had friends like from a long time. I was busy. It didn't feel the same here. She felt she'd stopped working. She was still making new friends. I think she felt it more. So I think, coming back to your question, you've got the two layers. You've got the travel, and you're trying to manage certain rhythms of travel, but at the same time, you're living abroad. So I think you have to kind of take that into account. So there's two levels. I think there's the regular travel, which I actually find easier, and I think a lot of people probably find easier. If you know that he's gone for like 3 weeks, and then he's back for 4, and then he's gone for 3 and back for 4, there's something that's regular. And from like different studies that have been made and everything, I mean, it's common sense as well. If you know that your dad's or that your parent's going to come back at a certain time and it's regular, he's gone, he's back, and that's it. This irregular toing and froing that's difficult to manage. And I think what I've heard from other moms have told me, and what I've done myself, is at one point you just have to make your own decisions. You set your own routine, and you make your own plans, and then you make sure you include them, because that's important. But at the same time, you're just like, right, well, this is what we're doing. If you can join, great. If you can't join, we'll make another plan for you to join remotely or get involved in a different way.
But I would like to focus more on this difference of having a spouse who travels a lot while being in a country where you have a solid network and maybe family and a role somehow in the community.
Yeah.
Compared to living abroad in a country that is not yours.
Yeah.
However, this can be defined. Yes, we can make other countries ours, but it requires time. And building a network in a new place requires even more of everything.
Yeah.
So I I completely understand that for you now, you are living in Switzerland. This is not your country, or not a country where you have lived for a long time, maybe in your childhood, or where you were a student or so. So you moved to Switzerland, which is a country of origin of your husband.
Right.
How is it for you being in that country instead of, I don't know, in France, for example, or in a country where your family lives or your long-term friends live, for example?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, when they're gone to, and when he's gone, a lot of the parenting is on me. And a lot of the the day-to-day disciplining and guiding and all that is on me. And I think when you're not living in your own country, you don't have that same village. I mean, you might not necessarily have it even if you're living in your home country, but I think having that village really helps in terms of raising kids. You don't have the breaks in the same way. You have to be a bit more creative about how you're going to get a break. And then you're trying to be intentional about connection. He's not here for the day-to-day guiding us on the culture as well. Because I think when we're together, I can say, he can see something's going on and kind of say, or explain it. But if he's not here, he doesn't see it. So even if I tell him, it doesn't quite come across the same, or I may not spot it. And I think that's one of the things that I think about now is, so it's like I may not spot something because he's not around, which he would spot because culturally it's his culture. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
So that's a biggie really, but I try and I'm trying to rope in friends, people, his friends as well, trying to rope in people who've grown up here and ask, like for noise, for example, we live in a building block, and we've had an issue with one of the neighbors about our boys being a bit noisy. That's something that confuses me, because it depends on different countries, on how the level of noise, etc. And so I rely on him, but I also rely on sort of people who've grown up here, and I go and ask them. I'm very intentional as to rope in other people that are local. Otherwise, it would be difficult.
Yes, and for this you have to have some connection with the locals, and speak the language,
And speak the language.
understand the culture, which is not so easy, like you said. Yes, when it feels like when cultures clash, and you are then the only one who has to find a way to balance it all and to smoothen up the edges with neighbors, maybe with the community, with teachers or whoever. It's quite something. This solo parenting, you call it solo parenting for a reason, because you are the one in charge, and you are the only one, although there is someone who is still in the family, right? It's not as if he would be in another universe.
Right.
He is still involved in the family. And maybe we can talk a little bit about his role in this. How would you define his role? Or is it even possible to define it as a role, or more like facets of roles that he has?
That's an interesting question. No, I think one of the things that's come out of our conversations, like between my husband and I, and also the research that I've done and the thinking that I've done around this, is that it's one life. It's a joint life. It's a joint reality, and that's something that we're really working on. And I think it's something, when I'm interviewing families that have done it for 20 years and ask them, how on earth did you do it? A lot of it is, we're in this together. We're together. And one of the things my husband said to me was, your reality is not the only reality. I'm not the oddball going out, coming back, and I have to, every time I come back, I have to readapt to your reality, and then I go off and come back again. It's like we're experiencing different things, but then we have to join it back together and make it a family story. And so that's what we're trying to do. So the word solo parenting really bothers me to an extent, because I'm not solo parenting. The boys have two parents, but what I call the implementation parenting, which is, did you brush your teeth? Go brush your teeth kind of thing, or a decision that Olivia and I have made together about, say, pocket money, or what time someone needs to come home by. Well, I'm the one at home making sure that gets done. And that's what I find, keeping those boundaries, that I'm the one keeping the boundaries. But another thing that I noticed was my default setting was that I was taking care of things. My boy asks me a question, I'm like, yeah, I'll take a decision on that right away. And then I realized, wait, why am I just taking care of all the parenting decisions? He's also a parent. And so now my default question is distance a good enough reason for him not to be involved? So I've twisted it on its head, and I'm saying, really, he doesn't get involved only if the distance is a good enough excuse. Otherwise, he needs to be involved. So, if now he reminds me for pocket money, he set the reminder. He can set reminders to check up on the boys if they've done homework or assignments. Is distance really a good enough reason for him not to do that? He can do that. He's also the parent. So that's helped as well. So the creating the joint life and saying, making sure that that we're sharing what we're experiencing, me and the boys, and then him where he's experiencing, and also this just involving him and saying, as a default.
Yes, I like this, what you just said. If the distance is really a reason for him not being involved, or the other way around, is presence reason enough to take everything on?
Right.
It's not, sometimes it's not bearable for one person only. I mean, it's good if we have a network, and if we have friends who can come over, or maybe extended family. In your case, I think you have family there as well who could chime in if it's necessary.
Yeah.
I don't know. But so if I understand it well, if we compare it to a house, you set the grounds with your partner, and then you define, maybe from case to case and situation to situation, whether you build now that room, or you choose the tiles, or the curtains or whatever together, and then you decide from moment to moment whether he is involved, or you keep yourself in the background. Maybe it seems also a little bit like a dance, right? Where you say, okay, now you're leading, now I'm leading, we're leading together anyways, but we keep a sort of balance. Is this even possible to have this sort of balance if the partner is away for, you said 8 weeks?
Yeah.
An up and down, or do you see a pattern that could be helpful for those who maybe are embarking on this journey and they don't know where to start?
I mean, I'm noticing now all the things he was involved with when he was here, more often. So I think for anybody who's embarking on this, to start looking around and seeing what they're involved with, whether it's practical things, or maybe they're the one who has the most conversations when one of the children is upset, or with one particular child, or maybe just keep noticing that, and then see what you can include when they're not around. And I think it works as well. Although, you see, I didn't think of it at the time, but it also works when they're gone for 2 weeks at a time. Thinking, well, what are they involved with? What are their strengths? And then when they're gone, how can I harness those strengths? Just as you would if you were in the same place. How do we harness each other's strengths to then bring it together? And can it be done even if there's even if it's remotely? I think it's really worth thinking about it, because otherwise the parent who's present takes on too much, or can take on too much. Yes. And then the parent who's away could feel excluded. And it's not intentional. It's just, if you leave it maybe go the way it naturally goes, then the parent isn't around, you're around, you take it on, and then maybe there's resentment. But I think it's this intentional of thinking about it and thinking, okay, how can I involve them? What are they good at that they can do that I'm horrible at? That they can take over even from a distance. It's not that easy. We have times where we do it better than others. Sometimes you're just so overwhelmed. It's just like, just get through the day. So
Yes.
it's and it depends on your couple as well, where you're at. It depends. You can't coerce your spouse to do anything. I think if us personally, we can get better at it, at knowing what our needs are, expressing them properly, getting our needs met, maybe from places, maybe not putting it all on our traveling spouse and asking them to fill all our needs. That that lightens things and makes space for other conversations maybe. So there's a lot of that as well, that I've been sort of developing in myself as well, and sort of that I've seen families who've done it. I've seen them understand your emotions, all that. It helps for this kind of lifestyle.
Yes, I think the understanding the emotions and acknowledging that you have these emotions, and they are not all positive, right?
Right.
You mentioned resentment, and I remember my father also traveled a lot when I was a child. So I must say my mom did not resent him that much when everything was going fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
But if there were problems, if there was a leakage, if there was something going on with us at school, or when she had an accident and my father was not reachable for several days, I remember that she would resent him for a certain amount of time, but more in a sad way.
Yeah.
But I remember that for me and my sister, we would resent our father as well.
Yeah.
Because we were saying, where were you when mom was at the hospital? Or, yeah, where
Yeah.
were you when this happened? Why aren't you there? Because our friends maybe had parents who were both there, or at least in the same country.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they were maybe separated, but they were in the same country or reachable somehow.
Yeah.
So this is now my next question. How are your sons coping with this? How are they experiencing this? I mean, I'm asking you, I should ask them, but from your point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's something that we're very aware of, and we try and be, what's the word, on top of. I want to say on top of, but sort of always kind of taking the pulse a little bit of how they're doing. It's like with any parent, you try and like with any child, is going to react differently, so that they don't necessarily react the same way to it. One will be much more vocal in saying that they miss their dad. The other one is less vocal. I actually took your question to a psychotherapist, and I actually speak to a psychotherapist every 2 weeks, because of the lifestyle that we're living, and moving, and then his travel, and me living in a country where I'm still learning the language and I'm trying to understand the culture. It was helpful for me to have someone who I could just kind of offload on and try and make sense of what I was feeling and what I could do. And it was also for the children, because I thought then I can put questions to her, and she understands this lifestyle. She's lived it and she totally understands it. And that was helpful for a psychotherapist as well, I think. And she said, just look at their behavior, because children are going to show you by their behavior, whether it's negative or positive, how they're doing. So we're watching their behavior. And then she was saying, the parent who's away can also think about ways that they can express how they, so that the children feel loved. And that's going to be different per child. And that's the kind of thing that you can't force someone else to do. So I can't force my husband to do that. I can sort of share the information with him, but I can't force him to do that. What I can do, though, is I can talk about him. I can say, your dad loves you. And then the other thing that she said, I've got it here. to encourage the child to talk, using a variety of ways to support them to articulate their feelings and thoughts, games, books for their age range. And family members may feel that there's loss involved around the parent's physical absence. It's important to acknowledge it, but then she was saying, then and when they come back, then be intentional to sort of spend time with them. But then again, you can have a parent who's always in the family, but who's never there emotionally, So I think there's only what we can work on. Olivia and I, we do talk a lot about the children, and actually about that, I'm trying to be careful about the types of conversation we have, that is not only about logistics and only about the children, because otherwise it can take over the whole conversation time we have. But we do talk a lot about them, and we're careful. It's not easy. I mean, I miss him terribly, and the boys miss him. But I think the better I can be mentally, and if I can express my emotions, if I can get the help I need in terms of emotional support, then I'm better off at helping them. And it's teaching them to ask for help when you're feeling down, to talk to someone. It's modeling things to them. It's modeling about how to get your needs met. So it's the life that we live. It's about being attentive, about watching where they're at, but it's not perfect by any means. And it's a tough life, but that's where we're at. Yeah.
I don't think there is anything like perfection anyways. I mean, life changes all the time anyways,
Exactly.
whether the partner is there or the partner is not there. And as you say, yes, I pretty much like what you say, that it's not a given that if a parent is there, they are also present in the life of the children. And as far as I know you, with what you've shared on Facebook, Instagram, and everywhere, your husband is quite present in the life of your children, because you managed to keep him present. Or maybe it wasn't always easy, and I can imagine it is not always easy, because when I was a child, my father couldn't call every day. So it was in the 70s, 80s. So we would maybe hear him once a week, not even us, but maybe only my mom, while my sister and I, we were at school. So there was not this possibility to connect every week. So we had to wait until he's back, and then you catch up, and then maybe the father resents that he missed something, or he said,
Yep.
well, but this was different the last time, and I thought this is the new normal, but the normal is already the past.
Yes.
And I would like to know, how do you cope, or how does he cope with somehow running behind? This is what my father sometimes said. He keeps on running behind our schedule and how everything works for us. But of course, now you have the opportunity to keep your husband in the loop by informing him, and maybe you have FaceTime with him. How do you keep him updated with everything? Do you think it's enough, or do you think it could be improved? Also with your sons?
Yeah, that's another big area. And I think what I found out from about keeping him in the loop, from him being away longer, can actually also inform when they're away for shorter times. And what I mean by that is one of the first pieces of advice I was given by a family where the husband was gone for 6 to 8 weeks at a time, was that when he comes back, there's this reconnection time where there's potential for conflict. And she said to me, he's going to mess up your routine. There's going to be discipline discrepancies. Just kind of, be aware of it, because she hadn't been warned, and it had created a lot of stress and hassle for them. And I think being warned is forearmed, I think. Is that the expression in English? When, at least knowing about it, you're not taken by surprise. And I think to a certain degree, when they're gone 2 weeks at a time, there is that disruption at either end, actually, when they're leaving, and then when they're coming back, there's a few days. I think Robin Pascoe in The Movable Marriage, in her book, she said they had a 24-hour period where they had absolutely, no expectations of each other. And my husband calls that the docking period, where there's just these few days where he needs to come back into the family. And one of the mums, I think I put the question out, one of the mums, she said, I was talking about reconnection in the Facebook group, and she said that as a couple, they reconnected instantly, but she had to consciously give him space to come back as a parent. And one of the things about the discipline or like the habits in the house, I think that's something useful to keep them sort of up to date with, because I think it's true, they come back and things have moved, and they might feel a bit like a stranger having to come back into the family. So that, anything you can do while they're gone to talk about them, to, like, one of the mums, she has all his space in his closet, she still has his toothbrush in the bathroom, so there's a presence. And then in terms of sort of keeping them up to date, I think one of the things I've been thinking about is how you get to a decision. So, like, letting them know how you got to a decision, because like last time he came home, he was like, why don't you just X, Y, and Z? I'm like, I tried that 3 weeks ago, but you were not here, so it's very hard not to snap back and say, what do you think I'm doing here? I've been trying so many things, and now you're just coming and like giving me a list of things I should try, which I've been trying for the last 3 weeks, So I think it's helpful to also think about, okay, how did I get to this decision? And saying, this is why I got to the decision I got to. It's communication again, isn't it? It's trying, and sometimes, they might not be available. They're working long hours. They get back to wherever they're staying, their head is full, they can't take it in. So sometimes I've found helpful to write it up, and they get it as a memo, but then they get it in one piece, they digest it in one piece, they're like, oh, okay, right, I'm up to date with what's going on with one of the kids or whatever. What changes in my house? How do I give them that information? Do I give it in an ad hoc way, or do I give it in have a set way of sending it to them, then they all have it in one go? Those are useful questions, I think, to ask. And again, it's not about doing it right all the time. We kind of go in and out of doing it right. Another thing that's super helpful, that Stephen Covey in his book Seven, the 7 Habits of Effective People.
Yes.
He's got a book, 7 Habits of Effective Families, and he talks about family meetings in there, and that is something that you can do long, even when they're traveling. If you have the habit of having a family meeting every Sunday afternoon, whether they're here or whether they're away, you have a little kind of update on family calendar, a little update. Every child can give an agenda item. You're teaching the kids how to, express things. And then if your husband is away, then they log in. Or you move your meeting, which you would do in work life, right? If one of the important members can't be there, if a team member can't be there, well, then you move your meeting. But then it gives this idea again of a joint life, right? So it gives them an opportunity to say, oh, okay, so you're going to, soccer this week. Oh, your soccer got cancelled. So then when he's talking to them on the phone as well, he's like, oh, so what did you do instead of soccer? So it kind of keeps that continuity going.
I like your perspective on the family like a team. I like that, because I also say to the families that I help, if you consider yourself not as a family in the traditional way, where you have this top-down approach with parents tell how everything is done, but you involve everyone. It's a little bit of a Dutch way maybe of parenting, where you involve also the children, of course, about age-appropriate things. But when you were now talking about this soccer game or training that's been not happening, it's like sharing the same calendar, right? That we can have nowadays anyways. And I think this would have helped us in the 70s, 80s, when there was no internet, that would have helped us and my parents, of course, to keep track on what is happening and why, and to be more involved, not only the parents but also the children, because this is the important aspect of this, that they are also involved in this change that is constantly happening, right? I remember when my father went away, then we had a certain, the dynamics changed. And I
Right.
liked also sometimes just being only women at home, you know.
Mm,
I have a sister, and my mom and I were just women. Even the dog was female. um, and it was a nice kind of, yes, unity that we formed. And then when my father came back, we also had this 24 hours where we knew it's better that we stay a little bit away from the parents, because they
mhm,
needed to get together again and to find a common ground, and then slowly approaching again topics that maybe were more important for us as well.
mhm.
I like that idea of a team and the teamwork
Yeah.
and everyone working together. As you know, I like languages, and I like talking about different languages, and you have several languages in your family. And you said that you are maintaining them as well. Can you tell a little bit more about how this works? What languages are you helping your sons with, and how does your husband talk with your children? What languages did you choose for your family?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like you make choices at a moment in time in a specific country, in a specific context, and then that keeps changing with the mobile life, right? So then the home language ends up being the school language, and then not again, and then you introduce another language. So I think it's keeping track of that has been a journey. So it's also shaped our family, and the fact that both boys don't have the same level of language ability. They have different abilities in different languages compared to each other. And I think that the eldest, he's 13, and he's got more of the French. So right now they're going to school in Swiss German, and they're learning Hochdeutsch in school because that's part of the curriculum in Switzerland, in the Swiss German speaking part. So Swiss German is everyday life, and then in school it's a mixture, but mostly everything is in High German. Then it's English at home. Then, well, I speak French and English. And when we first had children, we decided we'd speak English at home because we were in the French-speaking part of Switzerland, so it made sense, because then they went to school in French. So the eldest, he got school in French, and he's kind of maintained his French. But the younger one, he had school, he started in English, which was also the home language, and so he has less of the French. Having said that, when we went to my parents-in-law, he came out with whole sentences, whereas we hadn't heard him. He never speaks at home French. So it's very interesting to notice, you know, they do soak it in from the context, and from, you know, when we're with French-speaking friends. We have not been very proactive lately with the language. And it's, yeah, I think the travel has been a big element in sort of not having such a strong presence with the French. Yeah.
Yes, but I think also at some point the children also have a big say about what languages they need and they want to maintain, and we can let us guide a little bit from them and support them in that. I mean, whatever has been fostered in early years, you can always somehow restart from there or go ahead from there. Uh,
Yeah.
but what are the languages that they prefer speaking, or yeah, speaking to each other also?
I think they mostly speak English to each other. Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to speak with you was that he, because my husband would be the French speaker,
Yeah.
then he the fact that he travels, when he came back from his travels, he would want to connect straight away. You know, he's saying, I'm already kind of having to be more proactive in the connection, then I'm going to use a language that they might not respond to me in, and they don't necessarily want to hear me speaking in. So why should I add that to the reconnection bit? And I think that's where he's kind of said it's easier to connect in English, so let's just stick to English. But I think it'd be interesting to hear you talk about like how a parent can do it over the phone or over the internet, or how can a parent who's traveling, even if there can be like some sort of continuity between when they're away and when they're back, can they bring resources? What do you think?
As well, I think what we all want through language is to connect and to have a relationship with the other person. If the language that we choose is not a language that keeps the communication flowing amongst maybe your husband and both sons, then that language can be perceived as hindering this connection. So it always depends on what the intention is and how much of emotion and intention there is also from the child. So if the
Right.
child has, I would let myself guide from the child. And if the child says, oh yeah, it would be nice to talk a little bit of French, and I read a book, maybe they're reading, your eldest is reading something in French, I don't know if it's still the case, then these are like something that you can talk about also if there is a distance. You can talk over Skype or FaceTime or whatever. There are resources that you can use also online, of course, but it always depends on how a child responds to these. And very often the situation of being far away from each other is not the right one. But of course, if it's something that is a habit already, it can be also the occasion. Okay, today, I don't know, it's Thursday. We're going to have face call with dad, and we are going to talk about, and then you choose a topic in French, maybe 5-10 minutes, and just to get it into the habit again, if you want this and if the child wants it and needs it. But I always wonder if what we want as parents for our children to maintain or to reactivate a language that they are becoming a little bit more receptive in because they are not using them every day. Is it now our intention, our wish? Is it strong enough or maybe too strong for our children? Do they really need it or not? So there are many questions to answer. And if then you say, no, we want to reintroduce French and the children would like to, and it's like the secret language with daddy, or well, it wouldn't be because you understand it too. But that could be one nice thing to start again. Yes, why not? But I think it's one of the things to discuss as a family and to agree on as a family, especially because your sons are old enough to have a say and also an opinion.
That's really good. We could rediscuss it as a family. But it's coming back to the fact that distance doesn't have to be a factor for dropping a language.
No.
It's coming back to the sense that is distance a good enough reason for the parent who's away not to have not to be able to still so the parent who's away can still input the language, can still, I think it can be a great opportunity, because sometimes children find it harder to be on the phone, to kind of just have a kind of a random conversation with a parent. Sometimes having a support tool like a game or something that they're doing together, it's much more like they'll be more open to being on the phone than just kind of hello, how are you, yes, and answering random questions from a parent. So I think it's coming back to that idea of distance doesn't necessarily mean that the language needs to be dropped. The parent can just maybe needs to be more creative, or and it could actually bring other dimensions, than if they were home all the time.
Yes, but I wouldn't even say that the parent needs to be creative, because our children are very creative in that. So if the
Okay.
child can bring in something, a new game, a French online game, or whatever, a movie that they watched, or a YouTube video, or anything that they want to share, or a new song, or something like that. And it doesn't need to be something that is very long. 5 minutes, 10 minutes of a conversation can make a huge difference also in building that connection again, and enjoying this kind of connection, and yeah, breaking out of the normal routine of these calls. How are you? I'm fine. How was math? Good. Did you understand everything?
Yes, yes,
These kind of things.
yes.
And it can be refreshing at some point as well. But absolutely, I wouldn't say that languages should be dropped because the other parent is not physically present in the room. It can be maintained, and it can be fostered, and even become even more appealing due to that fact.
Hmm. It makes me think of, do you know Scriblio?
Yes.
Do you know Scriblio?
Mhm.
The online Pictionary? Because even if you're playing that with a parent who's away, like we would have the phone line, so we would be the audio, and then we would be playing with it. Um, and then depending on it is, the parent who's away can always insert the language, the what the word is in their language, and that's kind of another fun, playing fun games and things like that, and bringing the language in. But it's yeah, and our children are creative. Yeah, we in the group, I put the question out again: how do you involve dad with younger children and with children? They came up with loads of ideas. I mean, of the dad, like he started off with something on his nose, but pretending everything was fine, and the kids were going like, "Oh, daddy, look at your face," and he was like, "What's wrong with my face?" So like introducing lots of fun elements like that. But it's great to have ideas from other people, because you don't always think about it yourself, and then having all these having a list, or something that other families are doing, and then going, "Oh yeah, I'll try that, and that'll work for us." And that's kind of the whole point of the group, is to have these, to bring all these ideas together. And also this element of like language. If the parent who's away has got one of the family languages, then how can you kind of keep that alive, and you integrate it into the family communication, into the family routine. If they want to do bedtime routine, or a weekend tradition, that's another thing. Like I found, and again, it comes up a lot, is it's fine when there's school time and there's a routine, tuck 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 tuck, you hardly have time to think really. But then weekends, so I always say, it's, what is it, routine for weekdays and traditions for weekends. So weekends, it's more like, pancake breakfast on Sunday morning or something like that. And so how can you get the parent who's traveling, how can you get them involved in like some of the traditions? And maybe there's something to do with language there, the crêpe party has got to be in French or something. And
Yeah, so or the pancake becomes the crêpe
yeah, exactly.
le dimanche.
Ouais, voilà.
Ça serait pas
Nutella.
mal.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that's absolutely yes. The languages can be maintained also if the parent is away, and also in your situation you have the positive effect of it that you also share French. You speak French, so you can introduce French on the weekends, for example. But this
Yeah.
is maybe not what we wanted to talk about. But
But coming back to sort of the fact that my husband is involved, he is involved. He is involved, but it still takes being intentional and thinking about it. And some weeks are easier than others. And also it's taken us working on our relationship over the years. I think we're reaping some of the work, and some of the work we've put in over the years of saying, and also sort of saying, I'm going to, I can't work on him, I'm going to work on myself. Where can I get my emotional support? How can I figure out, how can I strengthen my support system? Things like that. So I think working on those two things, working on our relationship and working on us, each other individually, it helps when there's a lot of travel involved.
What I understand of all that you are saying is really one big thing that I'm taking away from this is that as parents, you need to be on the same page, at least for the basics, and work on them every now and then to update them and to keep each other in the loop.
Yeah.
Which is a very big one that I think maybe it's the advantage of not having the partner nearby, because then every day seems the same and you work, I think, compared to couples who are always or very often together, who live in the same place all the time. When you are in a couple like yours, you're much more aware of the work that you need to do. It sounds a little bit strange. It should be pleasant.
No, I see what you mean. I think you're making an excellent point. It's for me, it's about using the distance. It's like it really does show up things when he's home, and actually when he's not. It things are much more en relief, right? Because he's when he goes and he comes back, whoa, things really stand out. But it's about noticing what stands out, and then figuring out how to address it, which isn't always easy. I mean, he will still come home and we'll have a clash over, how I'm doing something, or how we each want to do it differently, about how we're raising the children for something. But then it depends. Well, I'm more laid back. He's more the disciplinarian. So I think that also depends on which one is the disciplinarian, because there usually is one that's a little bit more strict than the other. And so that's something that there's an adjustment happens when he comes back, because everything gets a little bit more, So there's that. What I was going to say about that was that we actually got a parent coach. Okay. And we're doing a few sessions with her. And it's absolutely incredible. We're both on the screen, and she's also on the screen. She's a third party, and it's not like therapy where you're talking about, your past, and it's more like, okay, what do we want to talk about? What do we want for our kids? Where are we heading? What do we want to show them? What do we want to teach them? And to be on the same screen and talking about it, it makes us feel again like this team. So that is definitely a tool that can be used, parent coaching. It brings a third party in to sort of highlight different parenting styles, and also to get us to talk about what we want. It just brings things out that we might not think of ourselves. So that's been super useful. But being on the same page, I mean, we have very culturally different ideas as well as character ideas. So some of the things we just have to meet in the middle, and some of the things we haven't resolved yet. And we just keep talking. But like you said, I think there is a plus side of not always being under the same roof all the time. Yes. Definitely.
But you mentioned a very, very important point that we didn't touch that much. Coming from different cultures and having maybe also different ideas about how to parent based on the cultures we come from. But I must also say that this can differ quite a lot, even among parents who grew up in the same community. So I tend not to give it too much of weight when I talk about intercultural marriages, unless there are really big gaps between them when it comes to values and beliefs. But I imagine this is not the case for you, at least not at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think it's a journey, right? None of us have been parents of that child at that age. So even if you've been parent of a 9-year-old, it's not the same child, so the next child will be a 9-year-old who's different. So it also, I think, comes to that. It's just parenting is as much about us learning as our kids, right? It's just such a journey. And I think you're right. It's not only cultural, it's, two people growing up in the same place. I think it probably helps. There are maybe some things. It was interesting. I talked to a mom a few years ago. They were both from Hong Kong. They were living in the States. And she was saying, you just have to think about it more when you're parenting in a different country. So I think sometimes, like, for example, when I look at my parents-in-law, they're both Swiss. That was the way of doing things. There was a certain way of doing things. You do it, all your neighbors are doing the same. This kind of, maybe it was a generational thing as well. Maybe it was at a certain time there was a generation, that's how you raised your kids. There's less questioning about it. I think what I found as well, becoming a mom and then living in different countries, is there's just different way of doing things. Like in the park, some parents intervene, some parents don't. Feeding, do you let them eat between meals? Do you not let them eat between meals? Do you let them eat at 10 o'clock at night? There are so many of these. And in the end, I was just like, I have to find my own space where I'm like, no, this is how we're going to do it.
And I think even that raising children abroad gives you a little bit the freedom of being detached from how things are done. And because you can find out how you want to do them and just say, oh, well, this is how I do them, or how we decide to do them. And I think it comes back also to your decision of having your partner not being around all the time. I can imagine that also that is not always easy with other parents, maybe at school, when they say, well, is your husband away again? And you say, yeah, that's just how it is. Oh, that would be so hard. I remember my mom sometimes got this and she said, I just don't want to hear it anymore. That's okay. And she said, yes, I'm fine.
Yes. That is true. That is true. When you're the only one, you're again the only parent, at the soccer match or something, But I think it's more, for me, it's about whether the boys mind or not, that doesn't stress me so much. I think the thing about the culture and being parent, it's like, it could go both ways. You could say, oh, well, I have the freedom and I can raise them, as we want, we can decide. Or you can think, oh, my kids are never going to fit in because they're always going to be different. So you can always look at it from both sides. That's how I grew up. I always felt different because my parents were always the ones doing things that just never fit in with all the other parents. And so I think I grew up thinking, oh, my mom, well, going back to language, my parents, it's so funny because I'm finding myself in exactly the same situation my parents were in, as an adult, and as a child. But I think you have to, I think it's useful to get to a place where you just at peace with how you're raising them. That's just the way it is.
Yes, and have this kind of open and flexible mindset of saying, okay, this is fine. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be very Swiss German or French or whatever, or English. In our case, also Dutch or Italian. It's just our very colorful way of being, and that's fine, and that's okay.
Exactly. And that's the big thing as well, is don't compare, even between expats, people living abroad, you're not someone else, they're not you, their husband is not your husband. Your stories aren't the same, what their energy level, your energy level, your kids aren't the same. Especially you can't compare yourself to a family where one of the spouses doesn't travel. It's just this whole thing of comparing, and I always have to catch myself and go, no, don't compare with a family next door who's never moved, and don't compare with, other families. Every family will have their own, we all have our own struggles. We all have things that stress us, things that don't stress us. But then learning from each other. And I think that's why I'm so happy that we're talking about this topic of traveling spouses, because the more I talk about it, the more other moms say, oh yeah, this is what we're living, this is what we're struggling with, or I'm just putting my head down, or I'm in survival mode. But so many families have this, and it's hard when you're living. I'm part of a group called Wives with Traveling Husbands. They're mostly in the US. But a lot of the topics are the same, it's he can't be here for a birthday. I feel like I'm parenting all the time. My family doesn't understand why we're living this lifestyle, things like that. And then on top of it, when you add like living abroad and you might have arrived in a new place and you don't. One of the moms said, I arrived in Ireland, he was about to leave and I knew no one. That's the reality of an expat family with a traveling spouse. That, and another mom, she said to me, I arrived and I only knew how to go to the mall and the beach, and he left, and I had 3 small children. Yes. So absolutely, I don't want those moms to feel like they're alone. Other families, I've lived it. It's okay. Other women have lived it, and I don't want them to feel alone. So I think it's great that this, we're talking about it and it's out there.
It's great that you have created this Facebook group as well, and that you are writing a book about this.
Yeah, I'm writing a book. It's meant to come out March 2021, and it's just gathering stories, looking at all the resources out there for the military families, because there's a lot of resources. They have a fabulous community, but just creating this community for other families, business people, humanitarian families of people who work in the humanitarian sector. And so it's just gathering strategies, putting it all together, and it's really based on these 3 axes of what you can do for yourself, how you can maintain your couple, the intimacy, the friendship, how you can develop your friendship as a couple, even if you're far away, and even use the distance to develop the friendship intentionally. And then parenting together, which is a huge difference. And then this reconnection, because that is one of the biggest ones, is when they come back home. I mean, yeah. That's a whole topic in itself. So.
I'm looking forward to seeing the end product of this. I would like you to share maybe the title of the book. Can you share it already?
Yeah. So it's going to be called Holding the Fort Abroad. I'm interviewing a lot of families as well. Families who've been doing it for 20 plus years. The children have grown up. So it's about figuring out how they've done it and getting their strategies. So, but I also share a lot the solo parenting expat moms group, which is a lot of mums in there have or are the mum who stays at home, the non-traveling, and then the constant parent, and then the other parent who's traveling. Put up resources on Instagram as well, so it's under the handle A Multicultural Life, and then the book is called Holding the Fort Abroad. Yeah, and that will be out in a few months' time. It's gonna be a show. I don't know how you say that, but
yeah, let's say it in French. A show.
Yeah, a show. It's really, hot off the press, if you want to say. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Rhoda. I could go on and on talking about this and more.
Me too.
We're sharing all the places where people can find you in the description of the video. Thank you so much for taking the time and talking about these topics, because it's not only one, it's one that brings to the next one, or related to parenting abroad.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for putting this topic on the forefront, and if people are listening and they want to contact me, share their stories, if anything's resonated with them or helped them, please just let me know. I'd love to interview them, to ask them how they're doing it, to ask them to share what's helping the most. Yeah, that would be great.
Yes, thank you.
Super. Thank you, Ute.